bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Object here of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the rivers flow and the ocean never overflows. Out of a fear of Him only, the fire burns and does the earth, where the mountains not sink in the water of the universe. Purpose of His divine grace is the Bhakti-Vinod Swami Prabhupada. We can understand from the Vedic literature that this universe is half filled with water, on which Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is blind. From his abdomen a lotus flower has grown, and within the stem of the lotus flower, all the different planets exist. The material science explains that all the different planets are floating because of the law of gravity or some other law. But the actual lawmaker is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When we speak of law, we must understand that there must be a lawmaker. The material scientists can discover laws of nature, but they are unable to recognize the lawmaker. From Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gītā we can know who the lawmaker is. The lawmaker is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is very clear that the planets do not think, since they are floating under the order or energy of the Supreme Godhead. They do not fall down into the water which covers half the universe. All the planets are heavy, with their various mountains, seas, oceans, cities, palaces, and buildings, and yet they are floating. It is understood from this passage that all of the planets that are floating in the air have oceans and mountains similar to those on this planet. Sravanti sarito bhītā, notsarpaty udadhir yataḥ, agnir indhe sa-giribhir, bhūr majjati.
And over here it is being described how the rivers are flowing, the ocean, and how the earth with its mountains, it doesn't sink in the water of the universe. So, there is a definite disagreement between the verdict of the scientists and the verdict of the scriptures regarding how these planets float in space. The scientists have advocated this theory known as the law of gravity.
But as Prabhupada says in his purpose, that the law of gravity is not
the reason why these planets do not sink. Why the planets do not sink is very nicely explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. There it is described how these planets are floating in space, why they are floating in space, and how that there is a predominating deity in each of these planets. The predominating deity on each of these planets is seated on a chariot, and all these planets are clustered around Dhruva-loka, and all these planets, as confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, they are being maintained by the personality of Godhead, just like the bulls are yoked to a central pivot. Just like that, the Bhagavatam explains, the different planets are all linked up to the planet of Dhruva-loka, which is presided over by the great devotee of the Lord Dhruva Maharaj. So the planets are floating in space not due to the law of gravity, but due to the manipulation of the air. The Vedic conclusion is different from that of the present day scientists. The scientists hold the view that the planets are floating in space due to the laws of gravity. But the Bhagavatam rejects this. The Bhagavatam says that the planets are floating in space due to the manipulation of the air. And this manipulation of the air is being made possible by the work of two entities. One is Purusha and the other is Prakriti. Purusha here refers to the personality of Godhead, and Prakriti refers to this material nature. So due to the combination of Prakriti and Purusha, the air is being manipulated and all these different planets are floating in space. And it is explained how the life on these different planets vary. The materialists, they have a device which can determine whether there's water on these other planets or not. So according to the materialists, there is no water on the moon planet. Hence, there is no life over there. But Prabhupada explains that there is life over there. But even though the moon planet is covered by dust, still there are living entities who live over there. These scientists are unable to realize that there are different types of living entities who live under different conditions. Prabhupada gave a nice example that there are certain entities that are born in the night and they also produce an offspring right after they are born, these insects. And these entities are died by the daytime. Even before the daytime, the sun rises, they are dead. But that doesn't mean that the sun doesn't rise in the morning. So similarly, just because the scientists have been unable to discover or see that there's life on these planets, doesn't mean that actually there is no life on these planets. There is life in the moon planet, but that can be realized through the revealed scriptures. In the Bhagavad Gītā, Krishna says, Brahma bhuvana loka punar avatana rajana mammo priti dikhantiya punar janmana viryate. Even if one goes to the topmost planet, he cannot free himself from the cycle of birth and death. That can only be realized if, however, one takes shelter of the Supreme Lord. This is again confirmed in the Bhagavad Gītā where the Lord says, Yanti devavrata devan kritya yanti pratyavataha bhūtāni yanti bhūtirya yanti madagina prima. That one can even go to the moon planet, the sun planet, but unless one surrenders unto me, he cannot free himself from the cycle of birth and death. So the point is that the process for going to these other planets is not some mechanical spacecraft. This is all explained down in the Vedas. But the process is by the process of devotional service. If one renders pure devotional service, then of course one can enter directly into the topmost planet, the planet of Goloka Vrindavan. But even to go to these other planets, there has to be some type of service performed for the pleasure of the Lord. So the scientists, when they advocate the theory that everything is being maintained by the laws of gravity, that is actually completely wrong. Prabhupada gives the example of these clouds. Now the clouds are floating in space, and the clouds are carrying thousands of tons of water. Even a Boeing 747 that flies in air can carry a certain amount of weight. There's a limit to it. But the clouds, they carry thousands and thousands of tons of water, and they float in space very comfortably. And in the Bhagavatam, there's also the example given of an eagle called the Shenai eagle. This Shenai eagle is a very, very powerful eagle. It can even carry elephants on its back. So this Shenai eagle is so powerful that it flies in space, and when it lays its eggs, the children are also born in space, and they can also travel from one planet to another planet. So the Bhagavatam explains, just like the cloud can carry tons of water, and the Shenai eagle can carry the elephants on his back. How is that happening? That is all happening due to the manipulation of the air by the work of the Prakriti and the Purusha, namely the personality of Godhead and material nature. So, the different planets are all floating in space, and they're all working under the direction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The personality is responsible for running these different planets, are seated on a chariot, and they travel in their respective orbits. And as we said, the orbit is very clearly marked, just like the bows that are yoked to a pole or pivot. The bows move in a certain direction. So all these planets, by the arrangement of the Lord, they move so perfectly that you never see a clash. Even these Boeings that fly in the sky, you see that these Boeings also, they crash and they fall. These planes have accidents. But there are thousands and thousands of planets floating in space, but they revolve perfectly. And even the stars, there are absolutely no clashes at all. So, the explanation of the scriptures is far superior to what the scientists will ever be able to realize. So, the Srimad Bhagavatam over here is establishing that all these planets are also being maintained by the Lord. Maya Dakshina Prakriti Suyate Sa Characharam. This material nature is working under my direction, and the intelligent entity is one who takes this knowledge from the revealed scriptures. Now, the scientists, they spend billions of dollars to try and go to the sun planet and the moon planet, but they haven't been even able to ascertain what is the true distance of these planets from Earth. For example, the Bhagavatam explains that the sun planet is about 10,000 yojanas from this Earth. 1 yojana is equal to 8 miles. So the sun planet is about 80,000 miles from the Earth planet. And the moon planet is about 20,000 yojanas from the Earth planet. So that's about 160,000 miles from the Earth planet. So scientists do not know it. They haven't been able to ascertain this as yet. But this explanation is there in the Bhagavatam. And then the Bhagavatam also explains what is the duration of these planets. On these higher planets which are presided over by the different demigods, sense gratification is definitely available. There's a very nice statement by Bali Maharaj in the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam, where Bali Maharaj feels sorry that Indra and his Prime Minister Brihaspati have chosen to stay in these planets where they can get sense gratification. Indra had the opportunity to ask the Lord for either the benediction to engage in devotional service or to realize some type of material comfort. And Indra and his Prime Minister Brihaspati chose to ask for material sense gratification on these higher planets. So, the duration of life in these higher planets, it is not eternal. Time, which acts as the representative of the Supreme Lord, also has its influence on these higher planets. For example, the duration of life on these higher planets is equal to the life of Manu. And 72 yugas make up the life of one Manu. So the demigods can live on these higher planets only for the lifespan of Manu, which is equal to 72 yugas, which is equal to about 4,300,000 million years. In other words, 1 yuga is equal to about 4,200 million years. So that multiplied by 72 is the duration of life on these higher planets. So the point is that one may get sense gratification, but Bali Maharaj regrets that even this sense gratification is only going to last for a certain period. So Bali Maharaj quotes his grandfather Prahlad Maharaj, because Prahlad Maharaj, after the annihilation of Hiranyakashipu, was offered the opportunity to either realize benediction, to realize any type of benediction that he may want. Or Narasimhadeva asked him if he wants elevation to the higher planets or sense gratification or anything. And Prahlad Maharaj simply refused. So Bali Maharaj remembers the instructions of his grandfather Prahlad and regrets the fact that even important demigods like Indra on these higher planets, they want to have some type of sense gratification. So the point is that even the demigods who are presiding over these different planets, their duration is also limited. Their duration is also limited to the lifespan of Manu. It is not that they can go on for this sense gratification eternally. It is only for some limited period. Therefore, the scriptures explain that everything has to be examined from a relative viewpoint. For example, if any of us was to go on the side of the river in the winter season, we would shiver. Or even in summer, to sleep on the banks of the river, we would shiver. But for the fish to live in that, it's no problem. The fish does not shiver. The fish is very comfortable. So for us to think that the fish is also shivering would be absurd. So the point is that with our limited senses, the present scientists are trying to ascertain life on other planets and if the living entities are living over there or not. Whereas the scriptures explain that there is life on other planets, but we cannot understand it with our material senses. If we want to understand it, we have to understand it with the help of the revealed scriptures, because the revealed scriptures have information which mundane science can never gather. Prabhupada makes a point about this in his Easy Journey to Other Planets when he talks about the different planetary systems. And he says that one should not think that the devotees of this Krishna conscious movement are backward, in the sense that they are still going around in their simple clothes and chanting Hare Krishna, whereas the scientists are making plans to go to the sun planet and the moon planet. Because the devotees of the Krishna conscious movement, they already know or what is the life on these planets. They already know that the duration of life on these planets is very limited. So therefore, they are not keen to go there. Just like Bali Maharaj. Bali Maharaj was offered the opportunity also, but he refused to live on these different planets and get sense gratification like Indra. Just like Prahlad Maharaj was given the opportunity, but he also refused. In fact, even Dhruva Maharaj, at one point, after he had pleased the personality of Godhead with his severe austerity, was given the opportunity to take anything that he might want, and Dhruva Maharaj completely refused on the grounds that he was looking for broken cut glass, but now he's found a diamond. So those who are intelligent, namely the devotees of the Supreme Lord, they do not hanker to realize elevation to the higher planets, where one can definitely experience a higher level of sense gratification than on this planet. Prahlad Maharaj has said, Maya Sukhaya, that this Maya is actually painful for the living entities that are trying to think that it is enjoyable. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a nice verse which says that in the material world, some people think that they are suffering and some think that they are enjoying. But actually in the material world, everybody is suffering. There is not a single entity in the material world who can claim to be that he is happy. So these different planets are all orbiting in space due to Kala Chakra. That is, they are fixed within their orbit, and they're all orbiting under the direction of the Supreme Lord. And the life on these different planets is not eternal. It is limited. One can definitely realize a higher level of sense gratification, but the intelligent person is one who doesn't want to go to these other planets. So, the material energy, which is being represented by Durga Devi, Srishti Pralaya Sadhana Sakti Eka, Chayeva Yakta Bhavanani Bhavat Durga. So, the Brahma Samhita explains a very important point. That is that Durga is the representative of the Supreme Lord. And Durga also means a force. So, this material energy, according to Brahma Samhita, is being run by Durga, Shri Shri Pralaya, Sadhana Sakti Eka. So it is being run by Durga, and this material universe is compared to a fort. Just like within a fort, there are prisoners. So within this material universe, the different living entities are all prisoners. Within the material universe, these living entities are all prisoners, and the different living entities remain within this fort as long as they don't cultivate the process of pure devotional service. This is explained in the Bhagavatam, that this material universe is like a fort, and it is being run by Durga Devi, who actually happens to be a pure devotee of the Lord, and the living entities who are conditioned for defying the laws of God, they remain within the fort of this universe. So Durga means fort, and unless one takes to the process of devotional service, he cannot get out of this fort. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Devi Esha Gunamaya Mama Maya Dhurateya. This material energy of mind consisting of the three modes is very difficult to overcome. So this energy is very difficult to overcome. But, however, if one surrenders to that personality of Godhead, then one can overcome the influence of this material energy. So the point is that this material universe is a fort which is being overseen by Durga Devi, who in turn is working under the direction of Govinda, as confirmed in the Brahma Samhita. And if one wants to get out of this fort, one has to endeavor very hard. And that endeavoring is known as the process of devotional service. So the knowledge of the scientists about this universe is totally unacceptable to the transcendentalists who are taking shelter of the Vedic scriptures. The entire Vedic scriptures are aimed at pointing out how the living entity can establish his relationship with the Lord. That is, the living entity must understand what is his constitutional position, and he must understand how that constitutional position can be fulfilled. This is known as Jnanam and Vijnanam. Jnana means to have the knowledge. What is one's constitutional position? The difference between the body and the spirit. And Vijnana means to act in that knowledge. So the Vedic scriptures are directing how the living entity should act by this knowledge and engage in the process of devotional service. This is the whole purpose of Lord Kapila describing how everything is working under the direction of the Lord. Because Lord Kapila is trying to convince his mother Devahuti that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead and everything is working under his direction. Just imagine, the Lord is able to float thousands of planets in space. And as this verse of the Bhagavatam describes, each of these planets has huge mountains, rivers, and all these planets are just floating in space. From a material angle, one can compare this to the airplanes. At any one time, we can see that there are hundreds of planes flying in the sky. They're not flying exactly in the same place, but they're all flying in space. So, if by the attempts of the material scientists, these planes can be made to fly in the sky, why is it not possible for the Lord to float thousands of planets in space? The material scientists are able to float thousands of airplanes in space at any one time. So why can't Krishna float thousands of planets in space? And these airplanes, Prabhupada explains, are also working on the same principle. The airplane is able to stay in the sky because it is able to manipulate the air. And because it is able to manipulate the air, it can stay in the sky. So the different planets are staying in the space also because of the same principle. And that principle is the manipulation of the air. But the only difference is that the manipulation of the air to float the different planets is being done by the combination of the Purusha and the Prakriti, namely the Supreme Personality of Godhead and this material nature. So, if we can understand this, we can get some idea of how great the Lord's creation is. The scientists may say that there's no life on the moon planet. Prabhupada explains, yes, the moon planet is covered by dust. But a living entity known as Sarvagata, he can live under different conditions. And each of these universes is complete. What are these universes composed of? 8 elements. Bhumi, Dalo, Apo, Nalo, Vayu, Kamma, Nabadi, Evacha. So there are these 8 elements that constitute these different universes. So, the different bodies, they are also a universe by itself. Just like your body, my body. This is also a universe by itself. Because these same elements that go to make up the universe are also in my body. So Prabhupada explains that each of these is a universe. So the scientist's statement that there is no life on this moon planet because they could not find any water over there is not very intelligent. There's an animal called, there's a vegetable called cactus that grows in a desert without water. So, one may argue that if there's no water in the desert, how does it grow? But it grows because of the water in the atmosphere in the desert. Just like, for example, if someone's looking at the other person's body, he can't see water in that body. But water is in that body. Or if somebody is looking at someone's body, he can't see the fire in that person. But the fire is there in that person. Otherwise, how is this food being digested? So similarly, just like there's fire in every individual's body, but that fire cannot be seen. Just like there's water in every person's body, but that water cannot be seen. So similarly, there are all these elements even on the moon planet. But one cannot see this with one's material senses. Therefore, the scientists have been unsuccessful in determining that. And hence, they've wrongly concluded that there's no life on these other planets. But there is life on these other planets. Prabhupada used to give examples of this, of a small seed. In a small seed, there's a whole giant banyan tree. For that seed, the small seed contains the whole banyan tree, which later becomes so huge. So similarly, on all these planets, all the 8 material elements are there. So for the scientists to conclude that there is no life on the moon planet because there is no water over there is totally erroneous. There is life on the moon planet also. There is life on the sun planet also, but the knowledge that they are trying to realize through their mutual attempts is totally useless. In the Padma Puran, it is explained, Athashi Krishna namadi na bhavid griham indriyahi te vo mukehi jivado. That if one tries to understand the personality of Godhead with his material senses, he will never be successful. But if, however, one takes to the process of seva, or the rendering of devotional service, then one can understand. So everything has to be understood according to circumstances, according to time, and according to the object. This is explained in the Vedas. Everything has to be examined according to that, just like we gave the example earlier. An ordinary living entity cannot live next to the river, but this fish is able to live in the river very comfortably without shivering, because the fish's body is of a different constitution. This is known as desha. Desha means circumstances. So the fish's body is different. By the arrangement of material nature, which is working under the direction of the Lord, the fish has a body that permits it to live on water. In fact, if the fish is brought out of water, the fish cannot survive. So, by constitution, the fish is meant to live in water. Thala means time. So this is another element that has to be borne in mind when we are judging these things. That according to time and circumstances, the fish again is an animal that is meant to live in water. And object, this is known as patra. So we should keep these things, 3 things in mind: time, object, and circumstances. Then we can understand what and how the creation of the Lord is working. And if we want to try and analyze this creation of the Lord with our material senses, one will never be successful. So this material universe is compared to a fort, and the living entities who are staying in this fort are like prisoners, just like in a war. Prisoners, they are prisoners of war. So the living entities who are entrapped in this fort are all prisoners. And these prisoners can only be released from the fort if they rectify their mistake. Just like in the Chaitanya Charitamrita it is stated, Krishna bhuli se jiva nade bhai mukha, ataiva maya tare deha samsara dukha. So the living entity, because of his forgetfulness of the Supreme Lord, he is in the material world where he is just experiencing nothing but misery. So the reason we are in this fort is because of our forgetting the Lord. Therefore, if some of the other one takes to the process of devotional service, then he can get out of this fort of material nature. And this is the point that is made by Bali Maharaj. Because Bali Maharaj was regretting how Indra chose the opportunity to get to realize sense gratification rather than taking the path of salvation, which was taking the path of devotional service, which was chosen by Prahlad Maharaj. Prabhupada explains that there are two types of opulences. One opulence is that one acquires due to the law of karma. That's according to one's past actions, he gets opulences. And the other opulences that one acquires by rendering devotional service. When one renders devotional service, then one automatically becomes opulent, because when one is rendering devotional service, he comes under the divine protection of Krishna. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gītā. Krishna says, those who surrender to me, I protect them in all situations. In the Bhagavad Gītā also he says, ma-sitaḥ. Ma-sitaḥ means do not worry.
Hare Krishna.